Okay, caution, the word species. When you look at the Bible, it never mentions the word species. Genesis 1:11 gives you the first comment on kind, after its own kind. But that's in English. Kind as in kin as in relatives, right? So when you look at your relatives or my relatives, we have a general principle. The closer you're related, the more like you'll be, right? The further apart you're related, the less likely you are to look pretty much the same. Now, that's in English. If you go to the Latin Bible, you use the word species. I'm trying to give an insight into why that's not the right word to use. When you have a look at the word species, it comes from our classification system, genus and species. But the man who invented that, Carl von Linné, otherwise known as Linnaeus, he was an evangelical Lutheran, okay, a Bible-believing creationist. And he publicly confessed where he gets his ideas from. When you read your Bible in the 1600s, it's not in English. It's in Latin or Greek. And in Latin and Greek, Genesis 1:11 says, and God created the creatures each after their own, that's the English bit because you'll understand it, each after their own genus. So Carl von Linné lifts the word genus straight out of the Bible. It means a separate group. So the teaching of the Bible is that God created each major group separately and unrelated. Now, when we get to the word species, we know that we find that a very useful concept too. So I find dogs in India, I find dogs in Australia, I find jackals in Africa, I find coyotes in America, but they all kind of look like dogs, right? So therefore we have the dog genus Canis, right, which is Latin for dog, and then we have the species. So Canis miscellaneus, the black-backed jackal, or the black-backed dog, right? And most people think, Darwin wrote a book in which species 1 becomes species 2, becomes species 3. Listen, you've got 186 species of ducks, the last I read anyway, but they're all ducks. Right? And they all quack. You know the old joke, if it quacks and it wobbles, then it's probably a duck. So what you've got is a conflict there in the phraseology. Does the Bible support species turning into other species? That's not a hassle at all. Genus is turning into a different kind of genus. Dogs turning into cats, dogs turning into chickens. That's what the theory of evolution is actually all about, and it never, ever gets there. As I like to tell people, we have one genus of mankind, we have one species of mankind, so the people who believe in evolution are hypocrites. They're believing something, but they're not doing it, right? Nobody's evolving, not even into a new species of man. So the old rule the farmers had is still very useful. If you want to know if something is the same species, then try to crossbreed it. Even though the donkey and the horse look pretty much alike, we use the word species because when you cross them, you never get fertile offspring. And if you do occasionally get what looks like a fertile one, it will never breed true. So therefore, same genus, different species, good concept. I went and did genetics at Queensland University for 3 years because in geology I discovered we were undertakers. We just dug up dead things. So I thought, okay, I want to find out about living things. 2 things came out of that. Number 1, our professor was a world expert on Drosophila melanogaster, the fruit fly, the little one that buzzes around apples and things like that. And he made several comments that were very useful. Number 1, we have no idea how anything could evolve. The theory of evolution, we just don't know how to make things evolve. But then we did an in-depth study on species of fruit flies. And when you looked at the fact that you go up the west coast of California, which is the classic study, and there's species 1, species 2, species 3, species 4, and then you study why, it's got nothing to do with evolution at all. There are many ways you can make species without changing the genus at all. So because we don't have any fancy microscopes or anything here, let's give you a sort of simple illustration. When you look at, say, the chromosome in the fruit fly, chromosomes are brilliantly designed to self-repair. So when you get, say, a radiation burst in here, a chromosome can break. You now have 2 halves of it. But what you find under the microscope, and you can actually see this, it sort of develops sticky ends and almost goes looking for its other half, and you'll find it will glue together. But sometimes it glues together backwards. So now you have the same chromosome, but instead of the order A, B, C, D, E, F, G for the instructions, is now A, B, C, F, E, D. Now that fruit fly will end up with different shaped wings because many of the instructions are read from A to Z. right? And if you change that order, you'll end up with a different set of instructions. It's like, going to the Ford Motor Factory or even, Mercedes. If you change the order in which the production line is put and you try to put the chassis there first and then the paint before you put the bodywork, you've wasted your paint. You'll end up with an unpainted bodywork, which will go rusty. So it's still a Mercedes, but it's not the same one that you asked for. It hasn't evolved. Usually this produces degeneration. So species are real, but they often come about by degeneration, but they have nothing to do with evolution. Charles Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, really, if he wanted to impress me or God, he should have written a book called Origin of Kinds. But he couldn't, because you can't evolve one kind into another.